No. No.
Yes. Hi, Gina, am I live yet?
Yes.
Okay, hi, this is Nancy with onpoint-tv, Quilting with Nancy, and we're going to do a Facebook Live today instead of doing our normal published where we'll...
YouTube Live.
Oh, YouTube Live, sorry, thank you. Instead of doing our normal submission onto YouTube that we do every Thursday, we're not going to have one today. And sadly, we're not going to have one for a couple of weeks. Please try to understand that I have a full-time job on top of doing this, which FYI, I'd rather do this all the time. Gina has a full-time job. Athena has a full-time job. Teresa has a full-time job. So us doing these videos on Facebook is truly just it's a passion. It's a joy that we really do love doing. Well, we've had a little bit of technical difficulties. We recorded all day Saturday and found out that one of the cameras was not recording sound at all. So we have to redo all of those. What we were recording, so for future reference, these are what we were recording. We've already done the quilted tiles, so you'll know that we've done the bias cables, we've done the designs of them, but what I had not yet showed you was the applique quilting of these in a block by block quilt as you go style. That's what we recorded on Saturday, and literally just found out today that we didn't record any audio. And unless I'm gonna like dub it over, which we're not, sadly it's gonna be a few weeks until we're gonna have time to record again. I am heading out on a missions trip to Lesbos, Greece, to the refugee island in Greece. The end of April, I'll be gone for about 11 days. When we come back, we'll start recording again, but I don't know how this sounds, and might sound very selfish, but it's almost summer in Michigan, and when it's summer in Michigan, we really want to be outside because we get not very many really nice days. So when we do, so I honestly don't know when we will be recording these again. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you a little bit of a something else. I'm going to do a quilt as you go log cabin tonight. So I'm going to move these out of the way. Oh, this is the other one that we were working on, the quilted tiles. So this is one row of the quilt as you go for the blue and yellow. Like I said, we will be continuing that. You know, it's actually probably a pretty great time for you to make your bias, create your tiles, get all of your pieces all glued down, and then you'll be ready when we start publishing the quilt as you go. So what we're going to do today is quilt as you go log cabin. So let me show you a couple of samples. So this is my original quilt as you go log cabin. All right. So the piecing, here, I'm going to hide for a second. There it is.
Got it.
So the piecing of these strips is done one block at a time. It is a stitch and flip method so that it is stitched and quilted one block at a time, so then you're able to assemble them. Then the borders of it, you will have to wait because the borders is something we'll teach with the other block by block. So here is one that I made, and I made this a long time ago. Now I need you to trust me on this. I had made this one, had been teaching it for some time, when a student said to me, I remember a magazine article about that technique. I don't remember the magazine article about that technique. This is what the student gave me. It was in the Women's Day magazine, and it was August 1972, which would have made me 5 years old at the time. So I'm pretty sure that I did not see that at the time, but here's the really cool thing. This was done by Marti Michell. At least I hope it was 1972. Anyways, I never did see the article, but the article was done by Marti Michell, and you'll remember I talk about Marti Michell. Here is her quilting in sections. No, this is her machine quilting book, but then there's also the quilting in section book. So I thought that was really cool that Marti Michell was the one that originally did this log cabin quilt as you go, although I never saw it until, you know, after I started teaching it. So here's a couple of other examples. Here's one that I did, the quilt as you go log cabin. Here, let me move this out of the way. And with this one, I made it sort of a pineapple idea. So when I was putting down the strips, I took a square of yellow fabric, folded it in half and then added those to the corners here. Now it is 3D, which may or may not be a good thing. I don't want you to, honestly, I'm not quite sure if I'm not going to go back and stitch these down. I did this kind of 3D thing once, and when I washed it, these got all rumply. They weren't very pretty. So I might just go back and stitch all these down. But this was done Quilt As You Go. Now, with the original Quilt As You Go, I want to show you the back, because anything Quilt As You Go, the backing is very important. Here is the backing on this original one, and I'm going to see if I can find a seam. Here it is. Here is the seam for these blocks going together. It's very hard to see because I on purpose chose a small print with a busy background. That's really important when you want to hide the stitches. With this one, I did something a little bit different. I used a few different fabrics. So here it's very clear to see where my seams are. So my seams are obviously where these blocks change. So you can work with one big piece of fabric, small busy print, helps hide all the seams so nobody knows it's a Quilt As You Go, or make it obvious. With this one, I think it's quite obvious that this is a Quilt As You Go. Okay. And here's another one that I've been working on that we may use a little bit in our samples. I haven't finished sewing this together, but there you go. Log cabin, Quilt As You Go, laid out a little bit differently. Okay?
Ooh.
Ooh. Now the next couple of samples I'm going to show you are not really log cabin Quilt As You Go's. Well, I guess they are. They're actually from June Taylor. I'm not going to show you this one because he's a little bit different. But these are log cabin Quilt As You Go, or courthouse steps Quilt As You Go. And these are from June Taylor's Quilt As You Go series. So when she does her blocks, the stitching is similar to what we're going to do, but she puts them together with these sashing strips on the front and on the back. So here you see, again, I do have a small busy print, but you can see that sashing strip. Those are from the instructions from June Taylor's Quilt As You Go. So let me see if I can find. So there we go. This is one of her other ones. So June Taylor, these are a panel. Okay. Now this pink one that I did was with the cotton batting, but she has a couple of other ones that are with a polyester batting. But this part of it's the same. Whoops. There. With hers, the lines are actually printed right on the batting. So this is one that's actually done with polyester batting. I'm not a fan of polyester batting. I've never been a fan of polyester batting. I will probably finish this just because it's something I started and I think the blocks turned out really cool. But I'm not a fan of polyester batting. With this one of the June Taylor series, it's done on cotton batting, and those lines are drawn right on the batting so that when you're working with it, you're just placing your strips on the line. It's pretty nice, it's kind of simple, and that's really nice when you're doing these different types of designs other than log cabin. I do want to point out the border on this one. The border is a way to take a very boring quilt and make it more interesting by adding a cable to it. So I did this in the same technique as I did the quilted tiles with the bias cut strips and then making them, this one just was done with a 1/2 inch bar instead of those little 1/4 inch bars, okay? So this is my process. Okay. For this, I decided to use like this really, really fun fabric that I've had for a little while. It's Wonder Woman fabric. And I happen to be a fan of Wonder Woman. So take a looky here. All of these fun fabrics. And this was a fabric line from Camelot Fabrics. And in the jelly roll was these fun pinks and blues and grays. So I opened up my jelly roll, decided to use the jelly roll instead of strips this time. All right, this one's my favorite. There she is right there. Doesn't she look great?
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman. Okay, and one of these says, oh, these. They say strength and power, and Wonder Woman has bright pink boots on. I don't own a pair of bright pink boots, but I would really love to own a pair of... Gina, do I need a pair of bright pink boots?
You can paint them.
I could paint them. Maybe we'll do that sometime. All right. So I decided for this particular one that I would use a jelly roll. Now these mean that they're cut 2.5 inches. The other ones that I've done were cut 2 inches. You just need to decide what you want to do. I will tell you that with the ones that are cut 2.5 inches, I'm going to do an extra row of stitching around them. 2 inches would just be too big to be unquilted. So I took and I designed what I wanted to do, and I decided I would do a center square and then 3 strips on each side. That was going to be too big. So my square will finish up 14 inches. All right, so with a 2.5 inch strip, a 2.5 inch center square, and then building around it 3 times completely, and I'll show you that process, 14 inches. You need to know that before you start because you have to cut your batting and backing. Your batting and backing then need to be 16 inches square. So I took my backing and I was very efficient with how I cut it. I took my strip of backing, I'll show you my backing, and I first cut a 16, not cut, tore a 16-inch strip of 2.5 or 3 yards, I can't remember what I did, of the backing, and then I cut it again. Of those 2 long 16-inch wide strips, I then cut 16-inch squares. You be very efficient with your backing fabric because you want to be left with long pieces to be the backings of your borders. So with this, I did 16, 16. That's going to leave me about a 10-inch wide piece to use for my backing of my borders, which means I'll be able to put on a 5-inch border unless I come up with another plan. But just kind of keep that in mind. When you're doing Quilt As You Go, plan your backing fabric out to get the most use out of it. Okay, so I took my backing, and this is the backing I chose. It isn't probably the best backing I've ever chose for a Quilt As You Go. It is a small print, but it's really not busy. But the truth of the matter is I needed to start this today, and this just happened to be a piece of fabric in my stash that was big enough. So that's how it got volunteered for the job. So I want to show you how I prepare it. So here's the piece. I've already taken off 1 16-inch. The reason I think this is important is because people all over the world freak out when I start tearing my fabric the length of grain. So I want to show you it's doable, it's possible, and it's fabulous. I'm going to lay this down on my mat from 1 inch to 16 inches. Just going to make a nip, and then I'm going to rip.
That seems very satisfying.
It is. After a long day at work. Feels great. When you do that, you will come up with a couple of loose strands. You all pull out at one time. I always imagine the Pioneers ladies might have saved that to sew something. Isn't that a nice thought? Now, one reason that people do not like this is because of the distortion on the edge. Do you see this little bit of distortion? All right. It does cause a little bit of distortion. That distortion is less than 1/4 inch. It will be in my seam allowance. I don't care. It can distort all it wants. I'm okay with that. So I would take this 16-inch strip to the ironing board and press it out and do a little bit of spray sizing on it so that it was a little bit stiff so that when I'm doing the quilting, it'd be ready. So let me put this out of the way. And then I want to show you how I cut my backing. Might seem silly, but what I do, I love to use a cotton batting when I'm doing this. This happens to be a Warm and Natural. I'm an equal opportunity cotton batting, so I like Hobbs, I like Quilter's Dream. I don't know, what else is there? Whose else is there? As long as it's not cheap, I like it. I don't like the idea of putting really inexpensive, cheap, low quality products in my quilts. Kind of defeats the process of being an artist. I don't know how that sounds. It's just the way I feel. So this I need to cut into a 16-inch square also. When I take the Warm and Natural out of the bag, it kind of is already pre-folded like this. This was a queen size batting, I think. Keeping it pre-folded, I'm going to lay this on the 32 of my big mat, 32. And this is probably the number one reason why I like these 60mm rotary cutters, because you can actually cut big thick layers of batting when you have a big cutter. So I'm going to line this up now on 16. And then I'm going to get up on my tippy toes and push down, pull this away a little bit, and just like that. So you do have to be strong, but with the 60mm, you can cut through all those layers of batting, and the crowd goes wild. Wow. Then I would unfold it, and then continue to cut this into 16-inch squares. Okay, I think that part's the easy part. Okay. Then we're going to take our batting and our backing, and we're going to lay them together. I'm going to take my strips, I already have them over there on my sewing machine, and we're going to go and do some sewing now. So Gina is going to show you the pretty quilt while I move around to the other side. So that is the block that we'll be making with the Wonder Woman fabric on it. Okay, I am seated. You can come over now. And we're gonna, wiggle, 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 hi.
Wiggle, wiggle.
Okay, I hope nobody got seasick there for a minute. Okay, now Athena has the camera, and it just happens to be just the perfect length.
We have a question.
Yes.
Where did you get your large cutting mat?
My large cutting mat, you know what, I don't know. I know that my table was built by my son and my daughter-in-law while I was away on a missions trip. They actually built that for me. And I got to tell you, I think Santa Claus gave it to me. I told Bill that I wanted a full-size mat on the top of it, and Bill got me what I asked for, as he always does. So honestly, you know what? We will find out from Bill where he got it, and then I will let you know, okay? Because I don't even know what brand it is. I know that it's that white cutting surface that is not my favorite, but for covering your entire craft table, it's really very, very convenient. Okay, last question, that good?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to use my sewing machine over here, but first I want to show you, here's our little ironing board table. And on the ironing board table, it's just a little folding table, but I got to show you this mat. This is like one of those new rages in quilting right now, is this felted wool mat. It's a 1/2 inch, 5/8 inch thick. I am not a gadget girl. I'm not a big fan of gadgets. I like things that do lots of things. I bought this on a whim because I was going on a little quilting play. I was going down to South Carolina, honestly. We were renting a home, and I didn't even know if they'd have an ironing board. So I thought, I need to have myself a surface. I bought this. Oh my gosh, is this like the coolest thing ever? If you have not had a chance to try and use one of these yet, they are really, truly, truly fabulous, okay? So I've got my backing and my batting. I'm going to put this block up here. Oops, I got to jump up a second. Sorry. I'm going to take my 505 basting spray. I'm going to spray it down onto my backing. Not too much, just enough so everything holds together when I'm doing my stitching. Oops, got to get my wrinkle out here. One more. After I get that pressed, it's going to be secure on my backing, 16 inches, and I do that so it's 2 inches bigger. Now I need to find the center, so I'm going to fold it in half. You know, the one thing that you're going to want to say to yourself when you're making a quilt as you go log cabin is that when things maybe are not lining up perfectly, you're gonna go, yep, that's a Quilt As You Go log cabin. When it looks like I'm not really measuring and I'm just kind of making my way through it, that's when you say, yeah, it's a Quilt As You Go log cabin. A Quilt As You Go log cabin, I don't think is ever gonna be anybody's heirloom quilt. It's a Quilt As You Go log cabin. As opposed to the block by block series, I think that is much more heirloomy. I wonder if that's a word. Okay, so I'm gonna move this out of the way so we can move in to my sewing machine now. This is, let me show you this. This is what we're gonna be making. So I started with some 2.5 inch squares, and I did fussy cut those so that we have Wonder Woman right in the middle of it. And then using the pink and the blue, the jelly rolls, so just those 2.5 inch strips, I designed and will stitch this in. It really goes pretty fast. So let's take this. I am on my sewing machine. I've got my larger surface, so if you're working with a sewing machine that has, you know, where you're sunk in, that would be awesome. I'm using a FAF. With a FAF sewing machine, it has a built-in walking foot in the back, if you didn't know that. This is the FAF IDT, which is a built-in walking foot. If you don't have a FAF with a built-in walking foot, then you will probably want to put your walking foot on your sewing machine. Try to find yourself a fat 1/4 inch seam allowance from the edge of your walking foot. Quilt As You Go quilts are generally, especially because we're using a jelly roll with that zigzag edge, done with a larger than a 1/4 inch, okay? So not the scant 1/4 inch, go with a little bit bigger. In my bobbin and my top, I have Superior Thread King Tut. Now King Tut is 100% cotton, and this is a 40 weight thread. So I'm gonna put that in the top and the bobbin, because in the bobbin, I wanna, you can see, there's my quilting. And so that's what I'm gonna quilt with. I thought that looked pretty nice, okay? Gonna set it here. I do have my 1/4 inch foot in, but I am gonna go a little bit bigger than that. Gonna start with my Wonder Woman. Here's my crisscross that I just made. Gonna lay my Wonder Woman right down there. Now I'm gonna get my first fabric and I'm gonna lay it right next to it. Gonna go into position. Excuse my hand, sorry. I'm gonna find a better way to do that. Am I right in the way?
No, you're good.
Okay, and then I'm gonna start. When I get to the end of the block, I'm gonna cut the thread. Pull it forward a little bit. Fold the fabric back on itself. Then put your scissors on the straight and cut. Yep, that precise. I know, really, right? Now I'm going to finger press this up. Here's my strip of fabric. Gonna lay that back down, line it up, and sew. You do not have to do locking stitches at the beginning and the ending, because the seams will be crossed over with the next stitch. So that will lock it for you. Fold it back, cut, flip, and finger press. All right, now I'm going to my next color, which in my case is blue. Hoping the strip's going to be long enough. Okay, start and sew. And I am just seeing under the fabric where it is that I need to stop. If I go a little bit too far, that's okay. I'll just pull it out. I don't think I've ever gone too short. I want to cut some of these tails off as I go, because they do slightly drive me crazy if I see them. And it's such a short drive. Okay, turn and flip, finger press, and place this one. Ooh, it is just, you know what? I'm gonna run over and get another strip. If I use this one, it is gonna show that selvage edge, and I really don't want that in there. So please, Athena, entertain our guests.
Da 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 da.
Okay.
So
That's
there's
it.
a chat message that says Quilting Warehouse will have a sale on the June Taylor stuff starting tomorrow.
June Taylor, Quilt
On the
As You
Quilting
Go,
Warehouse.
will be on the Quilting-Warehouse website. Sale starting tomorrow. Just heard that on a chat. Okay, so when there is the selvage, I do want to cut off that selvage. I don't want to have the selvage in my quilt if I can avoid it. There, now I'm ready for my next one. All right, so this will be the last strip in the round. When you are at the last strip in the round, it's time to really press the strips. So cut that. All right, so Athena's going to back up a little bit, and we're going to see on my little ironing board. I'm right over here. I'm going to press this now with my real big iron. Yes, you could use like a small clover iron if you wanted to. I just find it really gives me a better, everything is just laid down and nice and crisp if you use your big iron. All right. So that's our first round. Ready for the second? Here we go. Place. Here's my second color. Usually with log cabins, you're going to go a lighter to darker in your strip color. Having said that, I think that, you know, the sky's the limit. What colors you use is really up to you. Fold. Up, see, and here I went a little far, but watch, I'm just going to keep pulling it until it goes back to where I wanted. So now when I'm cutting it, it's actually cutting off my bobbin tails. Kind of like that. Finger press. Place it. Oops. There. Okay. Flip. Cut. I am a big Wonder Woman fan. When they came out with Camelot came out with this collection, I was pretty excited about it. I just thought that was very cool of them to do that for me. And I do love pink. I don't know that these would have been the colors I would have chosen for the collection if I were the fabric designer, but they are what they are, and it was Wonder Woman, so I bought it. Okay, one more strip on this, and then I have something to show you that kind of helps us keep the process square. Now this one, because we are using the 2.5 inch wide strips, we're only going to have 3 rows. If you were doing one that had like smaller strips, this next step that I'm going to show you for this measuring, you would really want to do more often. I don't know why, but for some reason, log cabins, whether or not Quilt As You Go or traditional pieced log cabins, have a tendency to not piece as square as you think they should. I don't know why. It just is a fact. So I find when I'm doing a traditional log cabin or Quilt As You Go that I'm going to do this next step. So all right, Athena's going to back up to the ironing board again. We are going to take, first I'm going to press it. It's looking rather beautiful if I say so myself.
So I have a question based off of a question that one of our viewers had.
Okay.
Is this size the only size of a square that you can do?
Oh goodness, no.
Okay.
I chose this size because I had this jelly roll. The jelly roll's 2.5 inch wide strips. I just thought, okay, if I put 3 on each side, it will end up 14 inches. You could definitely go bigger. I honestly think that most of my Quilt As You Go blocks are a little bit bigger than what this is going to end up. I just chose this for what I was doing at this time. I say sky's the limit. Make them any size you want them to be. Keeping in mind Quilt As You Go generally means you want to keep it small enough that you can quilt it as you go. So this is my next step, and this is what I do to be sure that my block will end up square. I'm going to use a Pigma pen. This one happens to be a Staedtler 0.7 millimeter Pigma pen. Pigma pen means that it's made with Indian ink, which is permanent and acid-free. I am taking my 12-inch ruler, and I'm going to lay this down and try and get it to whatever size I can that will be square. Actually, it looks pretty good except for over here. So I'm going to go to about a 10-inch, okay? So here you can see it's a little bit bigger here. I'm going to put my hand right in front of you. I'm going to draw with my Staedtler pen. And then I'm going to draw on the top. And this is going to be my placement, kind of like in the June Taylor Quilt As You Go, where she has those lines drawn on the batting so that you get your line placement straight. This is that idea. So there's my line there. Now I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to line that drawn line up, in this case, on the 10-inch mark, because that's the size my block seems to be ending up. And it's actually turned out pretty square this time, but like, look at here, how much bigger this edge is than the last one. Why? I don't know. I'm usually pretty precise, you know I am. So why it is that sometimes they turn out straight and other times not so much, I don't know. We will ask God when we get to heaven. Okay, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to do my last round around it. So I've got my next pink one. And I do love this print. I just think that's fabulous. She's so adorable. Okay, oops, I lost my, excuse me a second, scissors. Since there is a selvage edge here, I'm going to cut that straight just by placing it on the fold. Place it on the drawn line this time. So not on the edge, but rather on the drawn line. Now you'll keep in mind that this is going through all the layers. Because I have a fat sewing machine, I have that built-in walking foot. You really need to be using your walking foot on this technique. Otherwise, the fabrics will not feed through evenly. So be really cautious of that. Keeping in mind, it's because the bottom feed dogs always feed the fabric on the bottom faster than the fabric on the top. So that's why the fabric, you need to have your walking foot on. All right. So we're going to line that up again. You can see the pen mark, which actually is right on the edge of the strip in this particular case. Oops, sewed a little bit farther. Cut those threads so I can back it up a little bit. Back it up, back it up, back it up. All right, turning for my last strip, and in this case is this darker gray. I've done some of them, and I'll show you when I get the other blocks, but I did some of them with the outer ring in dark blue and some of them with the outer ring of this gray, so that when they go to, I think it'll look cool when it goes together. I think you'll understand what I mean when I show you. One last strip. Now I did not rush through this, but you can see how quick it would be to get it done, and then subsequently to get the entire quilt done. Let's see, I wanted this one to be this way. Need to cut off the selvage. Right there. There's my pen mark. It's a little bit in now. Just trying to keep the whole thing square a little bit. Although we will square it up in the end. I just find that oftentimes the strips get wide in the middle and it just isn't straight, and I call that a pregnant log cabin block, which kind of sounds silly. It's just the truth. Okay, now I'm going to back up and press again. Excuse me. Move my mat and press. Now, with this block, I use these 2.5-inch wide strips. For me, 2.5 inches is 2 inches is too big of a space to leave unquilted. When this gets washed with a 2-inch strip unquilted, that's gonna be kind of puffy, and that's just not my preference. So what I'm gonna do now is a line of stitching all the way around the block in the middle of these strips. I've got that same purple thread in the top and the bottom. Because I have my walking foot all the way on, ooh, I do want to start with my locking stitch, so I like to dial down to a 0.5. I'm going to start here, take a few tiny stitches. Whoops, sorry, Athena. Then I got to go back up to the 2.5, which is my stitch length. Oh, one more. There, okay. And now I'm going to go right down the middle to the next block, turn. Right down the middle, turn. And this sewing machine has what they call pivot position, which means when I stop, I'm going to do it slowly here, the presser foot lifted up automatically, so I can just spin around. I don't have to reach back and lift up the presser foot. So right to the middle, it lifts up, I spin. Now, as the strips get longer, I like to use my awl to help keep things lined up. And I'm going to show you why on this next time. This time I'm not going to use my awl, okay? Even with my walking foot on, look how as I get to this strip, do you see how this top fabric is starting to bubble a little bit? Watch as I get to this seam. I didn't do it as much as, because it's a faff, it's fabulous. Sometimes that'll create a little pucker. Let's see if it does it on this next one. A little bit. See how it's bubbling up right there? I'm not going to change anything. And look at how it creates that little pucker right there at the end. Most walking feet do that, no matter how good they are. So when I'm sewing straight, I like to use an awl to kind of keep those the fabrics walking the way they should. I want it to all end up without a pucker at the end. A couple more times around. Oh, I hate to sew right over her beautiful face. Okay, get that out of the way. So remember, for this, because I started with those 2.5-inch strips, that's why I'm doing this extra quilting. Normally on a Quilt As You Go, I do not do any extra quilting, but for this I do. All right, so now I'm going to press this one more time, backing up, backing up, backing up, and then we're going to go back to the cutting board for a little bit. Oh, you know what? While I'm here, though, I like to use one of these pairs of scissors that's kind of this bent pair to cut the tails off the back. And I don't even know if you'll be able to see them. But these are the tails because I use the thread cutter on my machine. I will get these little tails. I just want to make sure that I get them all off. Some of them already got pre-cut because when I was folding that strip and I'd pull it back, they would actually get pre-cut. So that was kind of nice.
Speaking of Wonder Woman,
Yes.
Frankie likes your bracelet.
See, why do you think I wear that bracelet, Frankie? Because it reminds me of Wonder Woman. I just love it. So I've had this bracelet for like 5 years. Been wearing it for at least that long. So a long time before the movie came out. Been a Wonder Woman fan forever. Okay, now we're going to go back up to the cutting table. Gina, it's your turn. Okay.
All right. Here we
All
go.
right, we're back.
Here's Nancy.
All right. Now we've got this block done, it's time to trim it down. So I'm going to use my 15-inch Omni Grid, my nice big rotary cutter, and I'm going to trim this down to 14 inches, I hope. I'm a smidge short there, but we'll be okay. All right, so we're going to trim this down to 14 inches. It would be a good idea. Now, I couldn't do this because I had to get some ready for you, but for you to make 5, 10 blocks and then decide what size to trim them all down to. Then you will know what size your blocks are going to be. So the first 2 that I trimmed down, actually 3, were 14 inches. I need to make this guy be 14 inches too. It would have been better if I could have waited, but I couldn't. So side and top, move the pieces out. Now flip and line this up at 14. All right, so now we're going to take this block and another block and put them together. So that's kind of what it will look like. So we need to go to the big ironing board. I'm not sure, are you going to take this, Athena, or is Gina?
I can do it.
Okay, Gina's going to do it. Okay, all right. Ready? We're walking this way.
Woohoo! Here we go. Wait, let's see the
Oh,
kitty.
kitty cat.
There's the kitty.
Along the messy studio. Okay. All right. Oh, God. So we're here back at the iron. Now we're at my big iron board because I need to show you the lining up of these two.
I'm going to
This
stay
is-
down here
oops.
because you're very dark.
Okay, thank you. So this is going to be the plan, and I kind of like the idea of the outside ring being 2 different colors, and that's going to give me this secondary kind of design. All right. Now with this block, I'm going to look at the back of it, and I see with this block that my seam is facing the right-hand side. So right here, this is my seam. It's facing the right-hand side. So on this block, I want that seam to face to the left-hand side so that when these go together, I'll be able to adjust those seamings a little bit. So I'm going to take the top piece of this, I'm going to lift it up. See how I can lift it up here? And it is going to be sewed onto this entire block. So now I'm going to go like this. I'm going to pin these together. So this is a really good time to have ball head pins. Small pins kind of get lost in this process going through all these battings and such. Line them up. And I'm going to use minimum 5 pins, minimum. And then even as I go, I might put my pins back in again. Okay, heads up, Athena, I'm going back to the sewing machine. Okay, she was hiding. Okay, so I've pulled this back, the top layer, oh, I guess that wasn't the best way to show you. There, pulled that back. Now I'm going to sew through all the layers of one block and just the top fabric of the second block. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine again. And this will be a quick sew, so Jeannie, you can come with. The angle's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be sewing through. Now this, I do want to start with a locking stitch. So I'm going to start it, do a lock it back stitch, then pull my pin out. And then I'm going to position my pin here. With all these layers, it's quite difficult for machines to feed them evenly. So, you know, I think these pins are inch and a half away. And I just keep bringing them forward.
What about clips?
You know what? I do not think clips would hold here well enough. Having said that, I have never tried it. So you have my permission to try it and let me know how it goes, all right? get to the end. Again, I did a locking stitch at the end. All right, Gina, we're going back to the cutting board now.
Where's the cutting board?
That's where we started. From
Okay.
The beginning. Just the studio's not that big. It's not like Gina could get lost, but far be it from me. Okay, so that is now sewed together. Okay. You see this? We need this batting to be trimmed down so that it can go underneath that seam. I find the best way to trim this batting down is to separate it from the fabrics. So I'm just with batting, and to use my mat and rotary cutter. So I'm going to line that up at 1/4 of an inch, actually a smidge more than 1/4 of an inch, but not a lot. So right there, don't cut your fabric or your finger. Because, yeah, Nancy doesn't do blood. There. All right, so I've trimmed that off. Now we're going to go to the big ironing board. Okay, it's coming around. Here's Wonder Woman. Okay, come on back.
I was going to turn that light. It was very dark here. Yeah, that's better.
Oops. There. All right. So at this point, I want to press it from the back side. I'm going to press that seam going to the left. The batting that we just cut, that little guy, I'm going to tuck him underneath that seam. Now, the truth is, that seam is going to have 2 layers of batting. I guess I could maybe cut it off a little bit farther if I wanted to, but I'm so afraid of not having any batting there that I always cut it bigger so it tucks underneath, and it seems to work out well. And now, to be sure that it stays in place, I'm going to use, this is a 1-inch wide Fusible Interfacing by Marti Michell, made specifically for her Quilt As You Go techniques. Oops, it's doubled up there a little bit. I'm going to take this and lay it on top of there. What this is going to do is this is going to hold that batting in place through washings for years to come. Because of where I'm going to sew these down, there won't be anything holding that batting. There won't be anything stitching that batting. So doing it this way, I know that that batting will stay in place. I'm going to press this over. And if there's one part of this that my students have never liked, it's this next step. I'm going to take this. I'm trying to figure out how to show it to you without covering up what Gina's looking at. I'm going to fold that 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to pin it. And I'm going to pin it, and then I am going to hand sew it. Yep, that's the word. Gina's nodding her head like, yep, that would be the part I wouldn't do. And here's the reason. It just looks so much better. Now, I showed you with that June Taylor where she actually used kind of a strip of binding on the top and bottom. That's another technique. It's another way to do it. And if you like that technique, pick up some of those June Taylors and she'll show you how to do those. I think that the June Taylors even have some YouTube videos. Honestly, I've never watched them, but I'm sure they are worth watching. All right. So I'm going to then hand stitch this down, and I'm going to show you how that looks on the other one that I made this morning. Right here, okay. So this has been hand stitched down. So by putting the Fusible Interfacing on there, I've made sure that that batting will stay still, and I like the look of it hand stitched down. Go ahead, try it by machine, tell me what you think of it. It's not my favorite look, but that's totally up to you. So now I'm going to flip this back so you can see how these are going to look when I get them together. So I would do the same idea for the rows. Now it can be more difficult because you get these seams that are already taken up. When you're doing rows, this would be a good time. If I were going to do it again, I would maybe use the June Taylor technique for putting the rows together, maybe not the blocks. Maybe the blocks, maybe not the rows. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Putting the rows together really are the most difficult. When I show you the block by block technique, when we're doing the quilted tiles, that is when you will see my favorite technique for the Quilt As You Go. So, there you have it. Our Quilt As You Go log cabin. This was a pretty quick little tutorial on there. Okay, Gina, come up here a minute.
You're right in
Oh,
front
am
of
I
the
in the
light.
light?
Yeah, so
Okay,
come
all
over
right, we're
here.
gonna go back
Okay.
over here. And it's a live video.
Woohoo!
Thank you very much for watching. Again, I'm sorry that we didn't have our regularly scheduled program ready for you, but it will be coming soon. Please be patient with us. Please keep us in your thoughts and prayers, because these full-time jobs are starting to run us ragged a little bit. If you like what you see, I would love to have some comments. If you have questions, the best way for questions, you can leave it in the comments if you want, but I got to tell you, it's really hard for me to answer real life questions in the comments. It's better if you were to put it on my email. My email address is quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. That way you can send pictures, I can send pictures, and the communication is just a little bit easier. If you like our channel, please subscribe to it and hit the notification button so that you will know when we do publish our next video or when we're doing another YouTube live. We also are on Facebook, so our Facebook is onpoint-tv. We're on Instagram. On Instagram, we are onpoint_TV, a little bit different. And we're on Pinterest too. I've been putting quite a few things up on Pinterest lately. So there you have it. Quilt As You Go.